Good evening and thank you for coming. I've got to be very careful what I say because the boss is sitting down in the corner. So we're going to, we can't obviously see anything at this time of night or really at this time of year. But what I have done is I've constructed a farm walk and I've walked around and taken some pictures of things that we're going to see. And I would normally invite questions, but I think it's a little tricky in this format. So we'll have questions at the end if there are any. Please, as you see there, please wear your appropriate clothing and footwear for this time of night. We're going to, this is a map of the Great Wilbraham estate, and this is the bulk of the land that we farm, and I'll show you some of the other bits later. But it's basically Great Wilbraham. It stretches from the waters in the top of the screen, right down to the other side of the A11 by the chalk pit and Camgrain. And goes beyond Butt Lane to the right of the screen and to the Fulbourn Common on the other side. And that largely is the Great Wilbraham estate. And today we're meeting here behind the Rookery Barn. We're going to follow the blue line on the map and we'll go past the main farm site at Home Farm. And we'll have a look at some machinery and some equipment. And then we'll end up in the middle of the village right at the end. A few facts. I don't really want to bore you too much, but we're roughly, with all the various bits of contracting and management agreements that we have with various other bits of land, we're farming nearly 1,000 hectares, which is 2,500 acres. It may seem as though there's a lot of roads and buildings in there, but that does include all the tracks, all the various grain stores and barns and everything. And the woodland, I was looking at that yesterday. It's quite interesting. I think when that was all laid out back, the old Squire Hicks laid it out, all the woodland nearly is right on the periphery of the estate. I don't think it was any accident that it was put there to try and tempt the pheasants away from neighbouring estates. Staffing there, we've got myself, the farm manager, one full-time tractor driver, Phil, and then we have 2 part-time help at harvest time. And we have on the right, you can see 2 main tractors, 200 horsepower tractors. They're both Massey Fergusons. We'll see those in a minute. 2 smaller tractors, which are quite old. 1 combine and 1 JCB handler. And that is the major motive parts of our machinery. It's quite interesting. When I started in February 1981, we had only 400 acres, but there were 3 full-time staff, which included me, and we brought in a harvest student. Roll on to today, we've got less staff, although we do end up with 4 at harvest time, but 2,500 acres. And just curiously, the land that we farm now, back then, had 13 full-time workers, 16 tractors and 5 combines. We're now doing that with 2 staff, 4 tractors and 1 combine. It's a sign of the technology and the way things have moved ahead, really. So tonight we're going to, on our trip round, we're going to see some winter wheat and barley, and I'll explain some differences, some peas, a little bit of oilseed rape, some sugar beet, some cover crops which are becoming fashionable and probably even more so with the announcement yesterday about the agricultural bill. We'll have a look at the machinery and the grain store and a quick wander around the farmyard. So as I said, we start on the footpath behind Rookery Farm, and this is looking towards Fulbourn, and the fields on both sides of this track are both and the idea is that they generally put on a larger amount of biomass than the spring crops, which are sown in the spring, i.e. February. It says my internet is unstable. But they're both harvested around about the same time in July. So those we take slightly less growing cost to grow spring crops, but they do have slightly less yield. But the advantage of them is that they spread our workload. So we don't do everything in the autumn, we do something in the spring, and they don't all come to harvest at the same time. So if you look to your right from this footpath, that's looking back to Fulbourn Road and Mary Wright's house and Appleton Wood. It just looks like a field of grass, really. A bit sparse, but it will thicken up. But hopefully by the beginning of July, it will start to look like the picture on the right. And when we harvested it, that's a sample of barley. It could be winter, it could be spring. They look identical pretty well. With that, we try and make our barley go for malting. So it goes off to Bury St Edmunds or Stowmarket, where it's made into either malt extract, can be used for brewing or distilling, can also go to make milky nighttime drinks. And also there's no coincidence that Maltesers have malt in them. Okay, carrying on down that footpath, we've crossed the railway line and into the next field, where we've got some cover crops. Now, these are sown for several reasons, largely to capture nutrients, to keep the ground a bit drier, to help improve the structure. And we can see that here. This is the same plant, but somehow tend to grow rather long, and you can see my pen there, and the root is actually twice the length of my pen. Then other roots seem to go thick and bulbous. So the long, thin ones will go down into the ground, allow fissures then to open up for the worms and roots and moisture to go up and down. And the thick ones expand and crack the soil open to help loosen the topsoil. This is something that we'll probably be looking at with the new environmental land management system, which were announced yesterday. The detail's not out yet, so I'm not quite sure exactly what we're going to do. But it's a way of capturing carbon and organic matter. And often we will graze these off. I borrow some sheep. There's 500 in that field somewhere. But they graze it off, and then we can prepare it ready for the next crop. Actually, today I've had to flail that down with a mower because the sheep couldn't eat it. So we've had to flail it down, and we're now ploughing it. And this field will be going into peas. So they're planted in the spring. They don't like frost at all. And they will grow pretty well like your garden peas, look like that. But we will harvest them when they are started to go dry and hard. And they will generally either go up to worksop to bachelor's plant, where they're made into mushy peas of all sorts of descriptions. And also latterly, we've been sending them across to Japan, where they've been put into packets and snacks, a bit like wasabi peas and that sort of thing. And they love them over there. It's a slight premium, but not very much. Okay, so we're crossing that field and turn left up the footpath until we come to a gap in the hedge, and we look to the right, and that's looking towards Flea Dyke. And I've had to borrow this field from my neighbour, Jim Stalley, because I don't grow any oilseed rape, but I thought as we were passing by, we would have a look and see. So it's a very leafy plant, covers the ground very, very quickly, but is plagued by a little beetle called a cabbage stem flea beetle, which we used to be able to control with neonicotinoid seed treatments, but they've now been banned, and so it's very much a hit and miss operation whether we can get this plant established. And even if we do get it established, the beetle then burrow into the stems, and the larvae attack the nutrient flow up and down the stems later on in the year. So we may have a good crop now, but may not later on. It's quite a cost-heavy plant to establish, and a big risk towards the end of the season. but it produces the yellow flowers, which everyone sees and is either loves or hates. And the seed from that then becomes like little tiny ball bearings, black in colour. And that then generally now goes into spreads, butter spreads, into vegetable oil, and not so much in this country, but worldwide, a lot of it is now going into biofuel. Okay, so we get to the top of that little hill. I'm sorry this is all Great Wilbraham for the little Wilbraham people, but it's where the farm is and I can't move it. We turn left, and on our right is a field called 100 acres. It actually was 100 acres, but isn't quite now, because as you can see on the right hand picture, the top of that field is not particularly good soil. So we've planted over the years about 10 acres of woodland. And we've tried to plant native beech trees interspersed with some of the others to try and get back to some natural woodland. As I said, it is 100 acres, near enough, 90. And to try and encourage beneficial species like rove beetles and spiders and things which will eat pests of our crops, we've put in nearly in the middle a beetle bank. This has been in about 15 years now. It's really just a raised area of ground with some tussocky grass. It's left alone, no chemicals, no sprays, no fertilizers go on there. And I'm not convinced that it does help, but what it does do, it's an ideal nesting place for partridges, and the muntjac love it. There's always a couple of 3 muntjac in there. So that's helping to promote a wildlife corridor to link up the hedges either end of the field. Like I said, winter wheat in this field. And it was planted back in the middle of October when it was really quite wet, so it's done quite well to establish itself. Looks almost identical to the winter barley we saw earlier, and generally to the layman you wouldn't know the difference, but hopefully eventually it will grow into something like we see here on the left, some nice golden ears of wheat. And generally, wheat doesn't have the awns on them, those spiky, long spiky things on the end, so that's pretty well how you can tell the difference. And there's a sample of some wheat there in the middle. And depending on the variety, it's very varietal specific. We can either produce wheat that will go to make bread, go for milling wheat, we can make biscuit wheat, or we can grow feed wheat. So, and the husbandry differs slightly for each one. So if we're wanting to grow, we grow a particular variety to make bread wheat, we have to treat it slightly differently to give the right gluten in the bread, in the flour to give the rise of the bread. Biscuits not quite so critical. Pet food is even less critical. And I just we've been sending some about a couple of 100 tons up to Liverpool every year to make twiglets. So that's wheat. Okay, we'll cross over the railway line now, still heading now back towards the Mill Road. On the left we've got a permitted path, which taking this picture prompted me to get some new signs ordered for the permitted path. It's a natural shortcut for everyone who wants to take a slightly quicker route round the farm, but rather than allow it to become, we allowed it to be a path, but rather than allow it to become a footpath with rights of way, we've granted permissive rights over it. And this footpath here has had a tremendous amount of extra people in the last 9 months, up and down. And there's a couple of reprobates there walking up the track. The little orange pole to the right of that picture is a marker for the gas pipe. So with the gas compound on Mill Road, the farm's crisscrossed with pipes, and we have to be slightly careful what we do above the pipelines. They're about between 2 and 3 foot wide in diameter, these pipes, and very high pressure. So if we hit them, you probably don't know anything about it, actually. So we come up to the farmyard, and on the left is our covered machinery area where we put the probably more expensive and the more delicate pieces of machinery. The sprayer is in there, the seed drill often is in there, the tractors live in there. It's quite robust farm machinery. It can stay outside, but if we can put it inside and just give it some shelter from the elements, it helps. And we've also, to use at harvest time, we could put this into a temporary grain store by using our Lego bricks, which you can see on the right hand side there. They actually weigh 2.5 tons each, so they're a bit heftier than Lego bricks, but they do a good job. So we move on to the farmyard, which was actually built around 50 years ago. So somebody had some serious foresight in those days, because it's still manageable as a farmyard today. Some good concrete, enough area, and a very, very good barn to the left-hand side. And then you can't quite see it and we won't look, but there's a workshop in there where we can do standard servicing and repairs and things. Anything major, and the new tractors are all electronic, have to go off to the dealer. But to the left is the grain store, and then to the right is a selection of storage containers, which we'll look at. And then in the corner is my office, where everything happens. So the grain store is there's a green tunnel running at the centre of the grain store. So this is replicated the other side of that green tunnel. And at the end of the green tunnel is a large fan. So when we've combined the grain and it comes in there on a summer's day, it could be 30, 35 degrees of temperature. So we have to cool that down. So there's a fan blows the air in on the green duct, and then underneath the floor are the little plenum chambers, so we can blow the air through that and up and cool the grain. And we can actually dry it a little bit, but not too much. So because grain, when we sell it, has to be under 10 degrees C and 15% moisture. If we store it above those parameters for any length of time, it encourages molds and fungus and insects to grow in the corn store. So it's quite important to cool and dry the grain. So there's about 100 tons in the back of this one, and altogether this side holds 750 tons, same the other side, so a 1,500 ton grain store. In the yard, we have our tractors. Here is one of our prime movers. So that's about 200 horsepower, that tractor. Very highly automated, and we can see on the right hand side, looks pretty well, almost like a car. Got indicators to one side, we've got accelerator, brake and clutch at the bottom. But if we could look in the middle picture, we don't really use the accelerator, brake or clutch, because the levers and controls we have in the middle picture can do all that by our hands. So we can, little joystick, we can push forward or go forwards. And the more you push it forward, the faster you go. If you put it back, it goes reverse. And again, the farther back you put it, it goes in reverse. The buttons can change the engine revs, the response to various things, and the little levers, the blue levers, are the various hydraulic bits which we can operate to go up and down. And on the left, there's a bit I wanted to talk about now, which is our GPS receiver and screen. So all our main bits of equipment are fitted with GPS with a correction called RTK. And the farmer and myself are part of a little group called RTK Farming, where we supply correction signal to other farmers, which means that we can put our tractors within plus or minus of an inch of where they need to be. It's done by a satellite, you see in the top picture, a ground-based radio station and the tractor, and the signal bounces around between all three. The signal, when it comes through the atmosphere from the satellite, is corrupted, so you need the ground-based fixing to be able to place it within an inch. And on the middle screen, you can see some, on the left-hand side of that picture of the screen, there's different colors. And that means we don't just go in straight lines. We can variably apply seeds, fertilizers, sprays. So we can put the optimum amount in the correct place on the field. And again, that's accurate to an inch. And so that way we are targeting our inputs and not wasting them, and certainly not double dosing them or anything like that. And the map just shows that we've celebrated our 10-year anniversary now, and we've now covered the whole of UK, England and Scotland and Wales. And the green bit is our original area that we just thought we'd start with. So that's a little bit of a ancillary income for the farming business. The soil type here is such that we can plough everything. It's been around for more than 2,000 years. The plough still works, and our soil type lends itself to being able to be ploughed a lot. And you can see here we're sowing seed with our seed drill, but that is straight onto ploughed ground. It's quite unusual in the rest of the country, but this part of the world, it's very, very, very easy, very light soil, easy working soil. Our crop sprayer, but more importantly is our fertilizer applicator as well. So every time we're charging around the fields, we're not always squirting chemicals around. A lot of the time we're putting on fertilizer, especially nitrogen. And we heard in Dave Humphrey's talk a couple of weeks ago about artificial intelligence, and I just realised that our combine has got an artificial intelligence package in it. In the grain tank, the big flaps on the top, there's a camera which monitors all the grain going in, and we can teach it, or it can learn what is going in, and it can discover what is MOG. MOG is material other than grain, and we don't want that, so it's probably chaff or straw or bits of ear of wheat, so we can tell it that that's what's there, and it'll automatically then adjust the combine to remove that. And it's given us a really, really, really swift output, big output, and very, very clean, tidy samples. So that's artificial intelligence linking in with Dave Humphrey's talk. We load out from the grain store with our loader. That also loads sugar beet, it unloads seed, it unloads solid fertilizer, it will unload anything that you want it to. We sell all our product to a dealer, an intermediary, and he then will sell it to the mill or to the maltings, largely because they want 1,000 tons of a product. So the dealer will amalgamate 3 or 4 farmers with a similar sort of product and get them 1,000 tons. Maybe 300 from us, 500 from somebody else, and 200 from another place. So, and we can load about 90 tons an hour with that. So it's really quite efficient. Also in the yard, we spoke of some storage tanks. So there's one which contains water, which is both mains, and there's a little bit of recycled rainwater in there as well. The large one is a fertilizer tank, and then the other one is a bunded fuel tank. Okay, so that's a look around the farmyard and the grain store. So we'll leave the farmyard now and head back up the track, up the drive, up to Mill Road, turn right, and we'll get to the gas station, and we'll turn left down another permitted path headed towards Butt Lane. And then on our right, there's another field of wheat. We're looking back towards the A11 and the wind farm now, but I wanted to talk about the solar farm we have over there. So that's basically, it was about 60 hectares of not very good land at all. It's very light, very poor, very low nutrients, no organic matter. So we haven't really taken a lot of good agricultural land out of production for this solar farm, which is 140,000 panels and 900 kilometres of cabling in there somewhere. You can read the other bits about the 12,000 houses that we supply. It's also, on the view of it on the left, but also underneath the panels where they won't grow up and shade them, we've planted floristically enhanced grasses. So there is, and there's also a couple of hectare plots in there where we're managing that for wildlife. So it's not completely a desert for wildlife and nature. There is some quite nice natural chalkland flowers and plants coming there too. A lot of it is mown to prevent shading of the panels, but underneath there's some good stuff going on. So we're going to carry on down that track and cross Butt Lane, and just literally across Butt Lane is what we call Big Field. So it's big mainly because it's 52 hectares, 125 acres. And we planted some cover crop on there for similar reasons as the original ones we saw, but probably more so on this field to hide the hares from the hare coursers. So they can't see them, they can't chase them, they can't threaten me and do all sorts of stupid things. But this again is all, this is just mustard and buckwheat, so that will be ploughed down. It will provide some green manuring for our next crop, which is going to go in there, which is sugar beet. Now this is some pictures of this year's sugar beet, and there's my pen again, so you can see they're not massive, but when you think back to when they were planted in March, we didn't have hardly any rain then until July. It's quite hot, so they've done really quite well to survive that long. And the picture on the left, the little strip of like straw grassy stuff through there, is a bit of an experiment I tried to try and encourage beneficial insects into the middle of the crop again. Again, we've been banned from using neonicotinoids on this, and they had a massive anti-feeding property against aphids, which transmit a virus. So the aphid would fly in with the virus, feed, then its progeny would feed on the leaf with the virus in it and fly off and reinfect throughout the whole field. And this year, generally, we haven't seen it, luckily, but there's been up to 30% yield loss due to this virus. So my idea was to plant flowers to encourage the beneficial insects to eat the aphids to stop the virus spread. But we didn't plant them early enough. So this year we're going to plant them a bit earlier, and hopefully they'll be flowering by the time the aphids turn up, and the bees and the ladybirds will gobble them up. So this is, we have our sugar beet harvested by a contractor, because this bit of equipment costs more than a combine. It also weighs 65 tons full, which is why it's got really big wide tyres, and they all run at a slightly different place in the field, so we spread the compaction around a bit. And we'll stack it up in a heap, and there's our Lego bricks again at the back, before it goes off to the factory in Bury St Edmunds to be processed into sugar. I'd like to put a little plug in here for silver spoon sugar, which is made from sugar beet. And the tape and lard sugar is made from cane sugar, which is obviously all imported. And this goes largely into confectionery, silver spoon sugar bags, or fizzy drinks. Okay, so we're on Butt Lane, so we'll turn left now and we'll head back towards the village. And the field on the right is called Paddock Fields. It runs down Butt Lane towards the stud. And in the bottom left-hand corner, we have, it was a bit of a wet corner, a nasty corner with a pylon in it and a bit awkward to get around and things. So we've put some wild bird seed mix in there to encourage the birds, and also some game cover for the shoot. So it's a little bit of a nature haven. And then also underneath the pylons, of which we have 4 of these pylons on the farm, we've planted some low-growing shrubs and some various willow and hazel stuff. So to create what was a barren piece of land with the potential for problems, pests and insects and to grow out of, into something probably a little bit more useful, a little bit more benign. So back on Butt Lane, carry on to Butt Lane, back down into the village, and we're going to stop at the pub for a beer. So anyone for a pint? The reason I put this up is because the first brew of the Wilbraham beer was brewed with barley from the farm. They don't brew it there now, obviously, as most of you know, but the first one of the Wilbraham beer was brewed with our barley. Okay, that's it. A whistle-stop tour